It's 430,000 years ago, and you're standing at the mouth of a cave in the hills of what will someday be northern Spain. Below you, deep inside the limestone, there's a vertical shaft, a natural chimney in the rock, dropping 13 meters into the dark. You are carrying something heavy, a body, someone you knew, and instead of leaving it where it fell, the way every other animal on Earth leaves its dead, you're moving toward that pit with a purpose you can't quite explain, even to yourself. That impulse, the one pulling you toward the dark with a body in your arms, is one of the strangest things our species ever did, because nothing in nature requires it. A corpse doesn't care. Evolution doesn't hand out survival points for grief. And yet here you are. This video is about why humans, and some creatures that weren't quite human yet, started deliberately dealing with their dead. And the real answer is messier, older, and stranger than the tidy story you've probably been told. That tidy story goes like this. Burial is a sign of religion. Cave people invented gods. The gods promised an afterlife, and suddenly everyone started tucking bodies into graves with flowers and prayers. Clean. Comforting. Almost certainly wrong. The evidence doesn't show belief arriving first and burial following. It shows the behavior coming first, the handling, the hiding, the returning, long before there's any sign anyone imagined a heaven to send people to. Not a sudden invention. Not a gift from religion. A habit that grew slowly out of something much more basic. To see it, you have to drop the word burial for a minute. Burial is a specific thing, digging a hole and placing a body in it. But the deeper behavior is broader than that. Scientists call it mortuary behavior, which just means doing something intentional with a corpse instead of walking away, carrying it, covering it, coming back to it. Burial is only the fancy final version. The story starts much earlier and much rougher, which brings us back to that pit in Spain. The site is real. It's called Sima de los Huesos, Spanish for pit of bones, inside the Atapuerca mountains. And down at the bottom, researchers led by Juan Luis Arsuaga have recovered the remains of at least 28 individuals, a species called Homo heidelbergensis, an ancestor cousin on the road to Neanderthals. The bones are roughly 430,000 years old. Now, a single body at the bottom of a shaft could be an accident. Someone falls in. It happens. But 28 people don't independently trip into the same hole across generations. There are almost no animal bones mixed in, which is odd, and no signs they lived down there. The bodies seem to have been put there, deliberately dropped into the dark. And there's one more detail that keeps archaeologists up at night. Among all those bones, excavators found a single stone hand axe, a beautiful teardrop-shaped tool napped from rare red quartzite, far nicer than the everyday gray stuff. They nicknamed it Excalibur. It's the only tool in the entire pit. Some researchers think it was thrown in on purpose, the oldest possible hint of a body being given something. An object with no practical job except to go into the dark with the dead. Nobody can prove that hand axe was an offering, but nobody has a better explanation for why it's there. And that uncertainty, that maybe, is the honest heartbeat of this whole subject. Jump forward a few 100,000 years and the maybes start stacking up. In the Zagros Mountains of Iraq, there's a cave called Shanidar, excavated by Ralph Solecki in the 1950s and 60s. Inside, he found Neanderthals, and around one of them later called the flower burial. His team detected clumps of ancient pollen in the soil. Solecki imagined mourners laying wildflowers on a grave. It became one of the most famous stories in archaeology. The tender Neanderthal, burying his dead with blossoms. Then other scientists poked holes in it. The pollen, they pointed out, could have been dragged in by burrowing rodents or nesting bees. A gorgeous story, possibly built on the work of gerbils. But the story didn't end there. Beginning around 2015, a new team led by Pomeroy and Graeme went back to Shanidar and found another Neanderthal, nicknamed Shanidar Z, lying in a way that looks deliberately placed, head resting in a hollow, body positioned, in a spot that appears to have been used for the dead more than once. The flowers may be a myth. The intentional treatment of the body increasingly is not, and Neanderthals aren't a footnote here. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, a Neanderthal skeleton found in 1908 was long dismissed by skeptics as a natural burial, just a body covered by dirt over time. But in 2014, a team led by William Rendu re-examined the site and argued the pit was dug, and the surrounding sediment didn't match a slow natural filling. Their conclusion: someone made that grave. Neanderthals, our thick-browed cousins, were doing it too. So this behavior isn't uniquely human in the narrow sense. It's older than us. It was already in the family before our species finished arriving, which raises the question of what our own species did. and the oldest confirmed burial of a modern human, Homo sapiens, in Africa is heartbreakingly small. At a cave called Pangayasedi in Kenya, a team led by Maria Martinon Torres published a discovery in 2021. A child, about 3 years old, buried in a deliberately dug pit roughly 78,000 years ago. They named the child Mumtoto, Swahili for child. The little body had been curled on its side, the head possibly resting on something soft that has long since rotted away. A toddler, laid down with care tens of thousands of years ago. You don't have to invent a religion to understand that grave. You just have to have loved a child. Now here's the idea that turns everything upside down. For a long time, the assumption was that you needed a big, modern, symbol-making brain to treat the dead this way. Burial equals intelligence equals us. But deep in a South African cave system called Rising Star, a team led by Lee Berger has been excavating a species called Homo naledi. And Homo naledi had a brain about the size of an orange, roughly a third of yours. Small, primitive looking, not what anyone pictured as a gravedigger. Yet the bones are down in a chamber that is fiendishly hard to reach, through cracks in a chute so narrow that only small, slim excavators could squeeze through. In 2023, Berger's team went further and claimed these bodies were deliberately placed in the cave, maybe even in dug depressions, hundreds of thousands of years ago. I want to be straight with you. That claim is hotly disputed. Many researchers think the evidence isn't solid yet, that natural processes could explain the bones, and that the case hasn't been proven. The debate is loud and unfinished. But even the possibility rattles the old story. If a small-brained creature was handling its dead, then this behavior might not require our kind of mind at all. It might be older and deeper than intelligence itself, and that leads somewhere darker. Because if you strip away the flowers and the afterlife and the ceremony, what's actually left at the bottom of this behavior? Maybe something we don't like to look at. Some scientists suspect the very first mortuary behavior wasn't tender at all. It may have started as pure practicality. Get the corpse away from the living. A dead body draws scavengers, spreads disease, and smells of danger. Moving it, dropping it in a pit, covering it. That's hygiene before it's ever holiness. The grave might begin not as an act of love, but as an act of avoidance. We may have learned to bury our dead for the same reason we learned to bury our garbage. And there's a heavier possibility still. At some of these ancient sites, including bones linked to Sima de los Huesos wider region and other Neanderthal caves, researchers have found cut marks, signs that bodies were sometimes butchered, defleshed, even eaten. Not always out of hunger. Sometimes, it seems, as part of how the dead were processed. The line between we honored them and we consumed them is far blurrier in the deep past than we'd like. Reverence and violence may have shared the same hands. So, why did ancient humans bury their dead? The honest answer is that there probably isn't one reason, and there was never a single moment when it switched on. What we're looking at across 500,000 years isn't the birth of a belief. It's the slow thickening of a feeling. It likely began as something coldly practical, move the rotting thing away. Then, in creatures capable of memory and attachment, that act tangled up with something else, the refusal to accept that the person you knew is now just a thing. You cover them because you can't bear to watch them disappear. You come back because part of you won't let them go. The flowers and the gods and the afterlife came later. The stories we wrapped around a much older ache. The behavior didn't grow out of the belief. The belief grew out of the behavior. And that ache is still yours. Look at how you handle death now. You still don't leave your people where they fall. You still gather. You still mark the spot. You still return to it on certain days. And stand there talking to someone who cannot answer, arranging flowers on ground that does not need them. That toddler in Kenya was curled on their side 78,000 years ago by hands that felt exactly what your hands would feel. The chain runs unbroken from that cave to whatever grief you're carrying right now. The same impulse, passed down through 4,000 generations, to say to the people we lose, I will not just walk away from you. You never learned that. You inherited it.